Welcome to Being Smart About Your Future, Personal Growth Through Well-Being and Financial Management. My name is Stephanie Rosario Rodriguez, and I am the Catalyst Manager here at the Clubhouse. So a large part of my job is disseminating the Clubhouse learning model across a variety of institutions such as museums, libraries, after-school programs, and more. I also serve as the geographic liaison to the Clubhouses in Europe and the Middle East. I have about 10 years or more working with youth and families in a variety of different ways, whether that's the creative learning, social services, after-school programs, and beyond. And I'm hoping that some of this information will be really valuable, not just for you, but developing your own personal growth in the future. And some interests of mine include traveling, storytelling, and photography. I think it's really important for people to see that we're multidimensional figures and not just here to kind of preach information to you. So I'm really excited to have you joining us, and I look forward to this webinar. The objectives of today's webinar is going to be focused on the many aspects of well-being and how SMART goals can really help you develop a stronger sense of direction when identifying and planning your future. I think sometimes that when we think about planning our future, it becomes really overwhelming. You think of the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And sometimes, even the best laid out plans change. But this is hopefully to help you better understand where you are now and where you want to be and how to kind of build that pathway. During the webinar, we'll discuss the ways that executive functioning can also impact the plan that you have to make a better you. And we'll also talk about better ways to move forward towards your goals using action plans and a reward system. I feel free to take as much of this or as little of this as you want. Also knowing that not every method or tactic will work for everyone. So I'd be interested in really hearing what resonates with you, what you would like to take with you, or what you've done and are interested in sharing back to the greater network. So where do we begin? There are many tools to kind of start taking assessment of your life. And just so you know, this can be a really overwhelming process, but it's important to stick to it. I've outlined some general areas that are important to kind of start, or at least generally, it's a good place to start. And not all of these will apply to every single person. And some of them might look really differently from person to person. Some recommended areas that I would suggest at least starting at is your employment and your career. Where are you in your journey? Are you where you want to be? Do you like where you work? Are you getting everything that you want out of it? Are you able to access the professional development that you need and require, and so on and so forth. Personal relationships, interpersonal relationships. This is family, friends, romantic partners. It can be colleagues. It's basically kind of looking at how you interact with your friends, your families, your partners, and those around you, and how can you strengthen those relationships if they need strengthening. Finances. This is really a big one, and a lot of our workshop is going to focus on this. It's taking assessments of your debts and your savings, and if you're not where you are financially, where do you want to be, and how can you get there? This one is very closely tied to the employment and career. So sometimes they one influences the other. So we can talk about all the different ways to navigate those circles. I also put housing and environment. I worked with homeless families for a really long time, and one of the things I found is that the housing, your environment, your neighborhood, all of that has a really great effect as to where you are, how you are, and really where your headspace is. I think I took for granted how much housing can influence everything else. And if you're really thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, housing is the base of it all. And then from there, you can build up to more concrete things, and then ultimately more existential things. what leads us to caring for yourself. All of this is a lot of work. It takes a lot of assessment. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of sometimes sacrifices. If it's something like addressing debt really aggressively, that can take a lot of time and energy and bandwidth. And it's really important that you're caring for yourself and you're rewarding yourself through this process. So there's a number of assessment tools out there in the world, and these are three that I have found useful in my journeys. The first is the Wheel of Life. This is something that our staff has recently done in one of our offsites, and it takes into account all the different aspects of your life. And obviously, it's not completely inclusive. But I think it's one of the most inclusive kind of assessment tools that I've been able to see. And here what you're doing is you're looking at each kind of slice of the pie, and you're rating it from a 1 to a 10. 1 being not satisfied. This is absolutely terrible. I desperately need to make a change in my life. 10 being like, it's great. I'm incredibly happy as to where I am right now in this part of my life, and I don't think it needs any additional attention or changes. So, physical environment, that ties very closely to housing, business and career, finances, your health. Your health is absolutely important, and that's not just your physical health, but your mental health as well. Are you seeking the services that you need? Are you doing regular visits to the primary care? Are you seeing a mental health provider? And if not, what can take you, what can get you there? Family and friends, are your family and friends supportive? Are they your champions, or are they more kind of draining relationships? And if they are draining relationships, I think it takes a lot of consideration as to how you want to navigate those. And, friends and family and all those relationships, there's always highs and lows, it's ebbs and flows. But you always want to make sure that you're both giving and receiving an amount that is satisfactory to you and to your family and friends. Romance, that's often a similar to friends and family, but a little bit more complicated at times, and assessing that you and your partner are on the same page about where things really matter. Are you happy with the way things are going? If not, is there some changes that you would like to implement? Personal growth. This can be both professionally or personally. Are there any hobbies or crafts that you're interested in learning? Do you want to go back to school? So on and so forth. And then fun and recreation. I will be the first to admit that I am probably one of the first people to drop fun and recreation when I think I have other more important things to do, when it comes to saving money for my goals, or when it comes to, business and career. I often think of that fun and recreation to be a little bit frivolous, but it's actually, as you'll see, just as important as everything else. Empath, Economic Mobility Pathways, they're a shelter provider here in the city of Boston. And they have this assessment tool called the Bridge to Self-Sufficiency. I will give a caveat that this tool is primarily made for families living in poverty or families facing homelessness. But I think the general idea is something that can really be transition well. And their pillars, they have 5 pillars that are very closely aligned to the Wheel of Life. It's family stability. Are the needs of your children met? Are the needs of your partners met? Are your needs met? Your well-being, that's where are you? Where are you physically? Where are you mentally? Your financial standing, do you have more debt than savings? And what type of debts do you have? Things like that. Your education and training. That's looking really closely as to where you are on the educational scale. Did you finish high school? Do you have a GED? Did you do undergrad, or maybe part of it? Are you in a master's level? And so on and so forth. And then career advancement. And that is directly tied to income a lot of time. Are you making enough income to kind of keep you going? And I've included a executive functioning questionnaire, which to me has been really, really insightful in helping me kind of address what things do I need to work on. I think it's really easy to say, I'm going to work on my finances, I'm going to work on my health, I'm going to work on my family. But sometimes we kind of get in our own way. And I think a lot of the ways that we can move forward in assessing these goals and actually acting on these goals is really through understanding what our strengths are and what our challenges are. And there are countless other things, and you absolutely do not need to do an assessment tool. Sometimes I find that just journaling is effective, or creating a vision board, whether it's using magazines and collaging, or you do a virtual board like a Pinterest or something like that. I think those are really good ways to have you kind of start thinking ahead and really looking at where you want to be and how it is that you can get there. Marie Kondo, who is that tidying guru, she has a large part of her methodology is at the very beginning, start and focus on your ideal life. And that is something that go as wild as you want, and do what type of house do I want to live in? How do I want to decorate it? Who do I want to be in that space? And things like that. And it's really taking into account what do you want your life to be, and really visualizing that. And there's never too much detail. There's never too extraordinary. It's actually better to be more extraordinary than to hold yourself back in those planning stages. And I'll be sharing more of those links at the end of the webinar. And I kind of want to take this time to talk about executive functioning, because I think executive functioning is something that's incredibly, incredibly important and very seldomly kind of talked about when it comes to goal setting. Executive functioning is comprised of about eight different key points. And each of these key points are something that some of us are really strong at, and some of us are maybe find to be a little more challenging. And these executive functioning skills I bring up because something that I saw a lot when working in families in poverty is that when they are lacking certain things, or when they are in need of something, you sort of develop what's called a scarcity mindset. And what that means is that you are hyper focused on what you do not have and how to obtain what you do not have. So oftentimes for people that could be money. So if I know that going next month, I might not have enough money to pay my rent, I'll start thinking about all the ways that I can make that rent. I can get that money, but I might focus so much on obtaining however much I'm missing that I might forget that I need money for food, or that I need money for this, and so on and so forth. So executive functioning is probably one of the first things I think to go when we're living in that scarcity mindset. And even just knowing and acknowledging that you're in that scarcity mindset can be incredibly helpful. And that tends to be like, all right, am I so hyper focused on one thing that I'm losing sight of everything else? And if that's the case, there's definitely a lot of ways where you can recenter and kind of realign where you are in your goals. The first executive functioning little pillar tidbit thing is emotional control, your ability to kind of regulate your emotional responses. If something doesn't go your way, do you completely freak out? Do you kind of go red fuming when someone cuts you off, and so on and so forth? Initiation, are you generally able to start tasks independently? Are you able to problem solve strategies, or do you need someone to kind of guide you through the process? Working memory, are you able to hold the information while completing a task? And then shifting, the ability to move from one thing to another. And all of these sound pretty simple and minimal, but I've actually taken the assessment myself, and I was both surprised by the responses and then not surprised at all. The next kind of group of executive functioning skills is planning and organization. Are you able to manage your current and future demands? Are you able to look at a to-do list and say, this is what I'm going to do today, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow? A lot of different people have different ways of kind of managing this and navigating this, whether it's prioritizing or just giving yourself a certain amount per day or so on and so forth. But that's another thing to kind of really take into consideration. Your organization of materials. Are you organized, or is everything all over the place? If you lead the same workshop or you lead the same lesson plans, do you know where those lessons are? Do you know where that supply is? And if not, how can you make yourself better aware of those things? Self-monitoring. Are you able to really realistically look at your own performance and measure it against your own standard, and that's saying am I doing the best I can on this project, or am I just kind of pushing through it because I have to, or whatever it is. And inhibition, I think this one is incredibly important. It's the ability to stop one's own behavior at the appropriate time. And that can look a lot of different ways. It might be that you reacted negatively, or you're about to react negatively, but you take that moment and kind of say, all right, actually, let me come back to this. And I think a manifestation of this is when you receive an email that makes you upset or just rubs you the wrong way. You really want to write all these things that are in your head, but it's taking that step back and saying, okay, actually, let me come at this from a different angle, because that can really help, not just the relationship, but kind of keeping your own stressors down as well. So the first kind of pillar that we're going to focus on today is employment and career. And I think just because employment and career can be so tied to a bunch of other things, such as your housing, such as your finances, your employment can often decide where you're going to live and how much you're able to spend on rent and utilities and all those other things as well. So really start looking at where your career is going, and is that where you want to be right now? Are you working in the field that you want to be, or at least are you heading in the right direction? Or are you just completely unsure? Yeah, and if you are unsure, that's fine. I think there are people are always at different stages in their life, and it's never too late to switch careers. You hear those stories of how Oprah was fired at 30 and then, she started doing whatever. So, there's a bunch of different ways that you can kind of look and say, is this where I want to be? And if it's not, that's fine, because at least you know that you can move forward. Are you earning enough income to satisfy your current needs? And even beyond needs, your wants, are you able to kind of do the things that make you happy, or are you just living kind of paycheck to paycheck? If traveling is something that is a passion of yours, are you able to save money to travel to your liking? Or if you are a foodie, are you able to kind of set money aside to enjoy a meal? Or is it always kind of weighing in the back of your head? And do you become kind of guilt, or do you guilt yourself for indulging in those things? And are you financially set up for growth in the future? Have you thought about retirement? Have you thought about if you want to rent or own, or different types of housing? There's apartments and condos, and do you want to live in a high rise? Do you want to live in the city? Do you want to live in a rural area? And how are you setting yourself up for that? And even thinking if you have children, are you setting them up for financial growth? Are you setting aside a savings, or do you have a college plan? And so on and so forth. And then, are you surrounding yourself with individuals who you admire? I think it's really important to surround yourself with individuals in your career track that are doing something that is really admirable to you, whether it's you like where their research is going, you like how they've shifted, or their insights, or their connections, and really try to grow and learn from them. I think that there's a lot to be gained even just from being around the people who you admire. I had a teacher once tell me, you are who you are around, and I think that's very true. Another kind of big one that I wanted to highlight was personal relationships. Are your friends supportive of you? Do they understand what kind of drives you? And if not, how are they kind of either holding you back or pushing you forward? Are you engaging with friends and socializing to your satisfaction levels? I know, like I mentioned earlier, with fun and recreation, are you giving yourself that time to kind of go out and hang out, whether it's go to the movies, go out to eat, and so on and so forth? Allowing yourself to have that space to really just decompress and be yourself is incredibly important. And is your family supportive of you? And are you supportive of your family? I think this can be a complicated topic for a lot of people. And if you find that you either would like to have your family be more supportive of you, or you want to be supportive of your family, I think a lot of that can really be changed. The good thing about relationships is that you can always try and make effort to improve a relationship. And do you feel love, and are you expressing love to others? Do you feel that your network is supportive of you and of who you are? And are you showing that same love and respect? I think sometimes we take for granted the people around us, and just like, oh, they know that I'm here for them, or that I love them, or whatever. But are you taking the time to tell someone that, especially around this time where everyone gets the winter blues? It's really important to kind of share your appreciation for others. And finances. Finances is such a dense topic. I think we can do an entire webinar on just finances. And there's a lot of different kind of, things from here. Are you someone that rents, or are you someone that owns? Do you have a bunch of debt? And all of that we can get into. But the first kind of thing is your general personal finance. Do you know how much you're bringing in versus how much you're spending? You'd be surprised how many people don't know how much they make a month. They can say, oh, I make X number a year, but what does that break down per paycheck? And do you know how much you're spending? I use an Excel sheet that I track all of my spending every month. So every time I buy a coffee, every time I pay a bill, every time I add gas to my car, I will log it and I'll track it. Now for some people that sounds absolutely horrible, of sitting in front of a sheet and adding and coding and doing all that. But what I was able to find is that I was able to really see where my money was going, of like, wow, I spent $150 on coffee this month. That I did not think that, and it really kind of helps you. So even if you're not going to track, even if you're not going to code, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you start tracking your income, because if you don't know how much is coming in and going out, you can very easily be overspending each month, or even losing money on things that you don't even realize. Maybe you have a subscription service that you forgot about, or other monthly payments that are just kind of coming in. And it's also really helpful to see if you're accruing any fees. Like if you have a credit card and maybe you made a late payment, or you didn't make the minimum payment. Those fees on a already large balance can just be kind of hidden, but it's important to know that they're there. Debts and credit, are your debts manageable? Are you able to make all of those monthly payments towards all of your creditors? And, it's important to also note that not all debts are bad. So really look at where you have the most debts. Are they student loans? Are they mortgage payments? Or are they credit card loans with really high interest? It's really important, I think, to be able to see what you have. And if you are able, I would highly, highly recommend that you pull your own credit report. Here in the US, we have annualcreditreport.com, which you're able to get 3 free credit reports once a year, one from each of the major crediting agencies. So that's Equifax, TransUnion, and another one. So definitely do that. It is great for you to know, did you miss payments? Are you making payments? And what's the minimum payment? I would always recommend that even if you feel that you are absolutely unable to manage all of those payments, that you don't skip payments, that it's better to put the minimum each month on everything, and then start really aggressively paying down maybe your smallest loan and then the next smallest, and then kind of building up from there. There's 2 ways that are probably most spoken about when it comes to repaying debt, and that's either the snowball or the avalanche. The snowball is the idea of you start with a small debt and then you kind of build up. So if I have a $100 debt and a $1,000 debt, it's going to be better for me to pay off that $100 debt, even if there's a bit more interest coming in on the $1,000 debt. And the idea behind that is that we as humans we're not always the most rational people, but we're definitely very emotionally driven. So getting that win of paying off $100 is going to be like a instant gratification for you. Whereas you could be paying off that $1,000 debt for a few months. And then once you're able to kind of make space in your budget line, you don't have to pay that $100 debt anymore. So now the income that you are putting towards that can be moved to a larger debt. And the idea is you take small, bigger, biggest, and kind of move up that way. The avalanche looks at, it's the exact opposite. You're focusing on your biggest debts and tackling those off as soon as possible. Usually the biggest debts are the ones that are accruing the most interest. And for some people, their biggest loans might not be feasible to start with. And that could be student loans, that can be mortgages that are sometimes, $70,000, $80,000 to maybe $500,000 in terms of debt. So really kind of assess, if I have $6,000 in credit cards with a 24% APR each month, that's going to grow really, really quickly. So kind of think about what makes more sense for you. Are you someone that would rather that kind of emotional win after each payment, or do you want to see like those hard, like mathematically, I want to see those hard numbers go down as soon as possible? And don't forget that you can always kind of negotiate some of these debts too. It's better to call them and address it rather than ignoring them. And financial literacy. Do you understand financial basics? Is that something that was taught to you? I know that for me, I wasn't taught financial basics. So I in my early 20s, mid 20s, and now my 30s, I'm taking a lot of steps to learn about all the different aspects of financial independence. And there's definitely ranges, there's credit utilization. Are you spending more than 30% of your credit card balance? And if you are you able to pay it back each month? Are you making your monthly payments, your minimum payments, and so on and so forth? There are definitely some small tangible action steps that can help you address all of these things, and some of them are very small. So I would definitely suggest that you start with one small thing, even if it's pulling your credit report, and start organizing all of your debts, and that is like one big win for you. And your savings. Are you setting aside money each month? And if you are setting it aside, how and when are you setting it aside? Is it something that is automatically deducted from your paycheck, or do you just kind of save whatever's left each month? I would recommend that you save directly from your paycheck, like a direct deposit. It might feel a little hard or a little tougher that first month, but after the first few weeks, the first few page cycles, you really don't even notice that money's there. And what I have set up is it goes to a completely separate savings account that's not linked to my debit card. So if I wanted to take that savings and transfer it to my debit card, it would take like 3 or 4 days, which really, for me, that's really helpful because it kind of minimizes that that impulse to be like, oh, I'm at the store, I want this, I'll just move money from my savings. So, if you're not looking at it, if you're not touching at it, it's going to be much better for you in the long run. So what makes a goal SMART? SMART is an acronym: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant. Some people say realistic, and time bound. And every goal that you make should have all of these components, and we'll go into what those components look like. But always remember to be SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. First, we're going to talk about specific and measurable. Specific is your goal is clear enough that you know what you're seeking to accomplish and whether you've accomplished it or not. Save money is not specific enough, but save $500 towards an emergency fund is. Save money can be, I saved $20, so I did it. I saved $100, I did it. But then by not applying that threshold, you're kind of saying, oh, I can pull in from that, I can give and take, but really what you want to do is have that emergency fund and leave it. Measurable, that there's a way to tell if this goal was accomplished or not. Something like get good grades is not a measurable goal because good grades is subjective. But earn at least a B in each of my classes would be a measurable goal, because once you get that report card, you'll see, oh, look at that, I did get a B in everything. Attainable and realistic. Attainable. Can this goal realistically be achieved given your current situation and the work needed to attain the goal? And this is, I think, the most important when it comes to not setting yourself up for failure. A goal like buy a house by the end of next year may not be attainable for someone that doesn't have any savings and is making a median income. But it might be attainable for someone that is making $500,000 a year. So, you really want to take an honest assessment of your situation and see, where am I and what does it take to get to this goal? And we're going to talk about action steps, because, each goal will then be broken down into smaller attainable steps. Next is realistic, relevant. Those, they're kind of used interchangeably. They're slightly different, but I think both are just as important, which is why I wanted to cover each. Is the goal related to your progress, and is it personally relevant to you? My goals might not be your goals, and vice versa. Something like pay off $50,000 worth of debt in 6 months would not be realistic for someone making a median salary. So if you make $40,000, $50,000, there's no way you're going to be able to pay off a debt in 6 months of that stature, but you can definitely make progress towards it. Something like visiting Disney may not seem relevant to your long-term goals, but being able to save enough money to take your family to Disney in 2020 could be. Maybe it's been a challenging year, or you haven't been able to take a vacation, or that's something that's really a priority for you. And I don't think that needs to be explained. I think if it's important to you, it should be a goal, and it's just a matter of how you get there. And lastly is time bound. So the goal must have a time by when it will be achieved. And, timelines can always be adjusted, but be aware of the reasons why you're extended your timeline. Is it because, circumstances outside of your control, or is it something that you just didn't kind of make the steps and now you need more time? It's really important that you're sticking to the timelines that you set, at least as close to them as possible. I find that, if you have a month to work on a project, it'll take you a month, but if you have a week, it'll take you a week. So really be, realistic, and both giving with your time, but not something that's so open-ended that you're working on the same goal indefinitely. An example I gave is earn my master's degree. A master's degree you can take one class a semester for the next 20 years. So that's different than enroll in a full-time master program by the fall of 2020. Or it can be complete a master's program by 2024, so on and so forth. Really looking at what do your next few years look like? What do your next months look like? And how can you achieve said goals? Some sample SMART goals include save $500 by January 15th, 2020 for an emergency fund. Another is apply to 3 different undergrad psychology programs in Boston, Massachusetts by the April 2020 deadline. Those are very specific goals. Apply to 3. I know how many schools I'm going to apply to. I know what type of program. I know what type of city, and I know when. I always say that a goal that's not SMART is really just an idea. Say $500. I could save $500 over the next 500 years by saving $1 a year. But that's not going to help anyone. Eat healthier and get more sleep. What does eat healthier mean to you? Do you want to eat more vegetables? Do you want to try a vegan diet? Do you want to, eat less red meat? So on and so forth. And something like walk more. That I hear a lot, but are you setting yourself up to walk 30 minutes every morning? Are you walking during lunch? And so on and so forth. So really kind of look at what you want to do and take your goals and really keep asking yourself questions. Why do I want to do this? When do I want to do this by? What does it take to get there? And so on and so forth. When applying to a psychology program, I'm going to look at a multitude of schools in the Boston area that have psychology programs. And once I'm able to narrow those down, it's making a list of all those schools. What do you need to apply? Do you need a resume? Do you need a biography? Do you need a cover letter? Do you need to save money for the application fees, and so on and so forth? And you really start thinking that even by this simple goal of applying to undergrad, there's actually a lot more that did you apply for FAFSA? Are you applying for scholarships? Have you sought those out yet? It can be, each goal can have a multitude of action steps to go with it. I'm including some links from those questionnaires that we had earlier, the Bridge to Self-Sufficiency, the Executive Functioning, and the Wheel of Life. I think those can be really helpful for you to take assessment as to where you are. But what's really important is that you are setting goals based on what you want to do and where you want to be. And all of that is completely subjective. Where I want to be in 5 years is very different from where you might want to be in 5 years. And for each goal that you set, make sure you're asking yourself a question like, all right, is this specific enough? Is this measurable? Did I set up a time where, this is going to be completed by? Is it attainable? That's one I don't think we spoke too much on. But if I want to buy a house by the end of the year, I have 1 month left and no savings. That's not going to happen. But what are the steps that I can take to buying a home, whether it's signing up for a first-time home ownership class or meeting with a financial planner, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different kind of steps that you can take to get there, but keep asking yourself those questions. Is it attainable? Is it realistic? Is it something that's really in my abilities right now? Sometimes there are people that really want to leave their job, for example, but right now it might not be possible for you to take a 6-month sabbatical, for example. But when is that time? When is there a better time? And how can you set yourself up to be able to meet that goal? And again, is it time bound? Do you know when you're gonna be able to say, I did this? And that is really important. So the last thing I kind of want to add is that it's really, really important to reward yourself during this process as well, whether it's through individual action steps or every few action steps. It's really important to kind of make sure that you don't get bogged down. Some of these longer term goals are they take up years, buying a house, going to school, that could be years in the making. So are you taking care of yourself through that process? Whether it's setting small goals. One of the things that I always kind of like to do is when I'm developing a savings plan, I set a little bit of money aside for me to treat myself when I meet a specific goal. So if I wanted to save $500, maybe once I save that $100, I can get myself like a burrito or something, something. It can be something small. It doesn't have to be something incredibly big. Or you can take yourself out to see an exhibit that you really wanted to see. And if it is, see if there's a free museum day. So it's like a double kind of win. There's a lot of different things you can do, but definitely making sure that you're rewarding yourself in the process, because this can be really, really challenging, and this can be really heavy on all of that. So I would highly recommend that you really kind of take assessment of where you are, what you want to do, and how you want to get there. And that it's always fine to readjust and to shift as needed. And that's it. That's what I have to share with you all. I really want to thank you all for being here. And if you have any questions, concerns, if you want to chat about the goal setting process, action steps, or if you're interested in gathering some more additional resources on this topic, feel free to reach out. There are a number of articles, podcasts, shows, things that I'd be happy to share with you. And I'd also be really interested to hear of all the different resources that you have that have worked for you. And we can share that across our network as well. But I want to thank you all for joining this webinar. And for more information about the alumni program and upcoming webinars in 2020, please check out the clubhousenetwork.org/alumni for more information. And thank you, and take care, and best of luck on your goal setting.